Hi, I'm Sharon Collins. I want to share an interview I did with Daniel Sullenberger. He's a herpetologist with the Department of Natural Resources, so he studies things like reptiles and amphibians. And I kept hearing about these huge lizards. Well, after talking with Daniel, I learned they really are big and they can really be mean.
They get to be between 4 and 4.5 feet long,
Whoa.
and yeah, and it's the Argentine or black and white tegu from South America.
Take
Uh,
you?
yep, tegu. I sometimes mispronounce it as tegu, and people give me a hard time, but
Well, you're
uh,
doing better than I
not
am.
South America. Do what?
You do better than I am. I was saying Tegus. so
Yeah.
they that's a big lizard, and
Yeah.
I mean, are they mean?
They will defend themselves. They're not going to attack people unprovoked or anything like that. They're not big enough to do that. But if you were to grab one with your hands or something like that, they will defend themselves, and they have very strong jaws and sharp teeth, and they can even whip you with their tails and scratch you with their claws. So it's not something you want to just grab onto if you aren't prepared, and trained to do that.
No, I don't think I would be doing that. Would they attack like a cat or a dog?
Um, I've been telling people that basically a medium-sized dog, at least, is of no danger. Something really small, a small cat or a really small dog, possibly they would go after that. But most of the things they eat are actually a good bit smaller. Other lizards, rats and mice, insects, and then fruit and vegetables too. And then we know they really like eggs.
And that's your big concern.
Yeah, probably that would be their major impact would be their predation on native wildlife, and in particular the eggs of other reptiles and ground nesting birds like turkey and quail. Our state protected reptile, the gopher tortoise, lays eggs in a shallow nest, and they could easily find those and eat them. So yeah, there's a lot of things they could have a detrimental impact on.
And of course, the gopher tortoise is already in danger. Am I right?
Right, they're state threatened. They're a candidate for federal listing under the Endangered Species Act, and we've done a lot of work to try and conserve them and to preclude the need for them to be listed federally here in Georgia. And something like this could do a lot to undermine that.
And the last thing we need is some giant lizard coming up, sucking up their eggs.
Exactly, exactly.
Wow. That's, in the midst of a pandemic and warnings that we're going to have a larger hurricane season, now we have big lizards.
Yeah.
um,
Unlike murder hornets, these are actually found in the United States right now.
so are they isolated in just two counties right now?
As far as we know, the only verified sightings or captures, where we actually have a picture or a specimen, are from Toombs and Tattnall County down in the Onion Belt of Georgia. There are some credible sightings where we think it's possible there actually was a tegu in some adjacent counties around that. But as far as we know, it's limited to Toombs and Tattnall County, possibly starting to spread into some surrounding counties.
Any idea how they got into the country?
They're really common in the pet trade. I don't know how long tegus have been in the pet trade, but for decades at least. And they're sometimes bred in captivity, and they're available in pet stores and online, and people do keep them as pets. And so we think that probably that one got too big, or a few got too big, and somebody released them, and that's how we got them.
Doesn't it happen with a lot of things that people get these creatures as pets, and then all of a sudden it gets out of control?
Yeah, that's the source of a lot of problems with invasive species, especially in Florida. They have a lot more, a wider variety of this kind of stuff going on than we do. And a lot of that is related to the pet trade in some way, escaped or released animals.
Well, you just saw my pet, my
Yeah,
golden
I've got
retriever.
two walking around here behind me too, but they're probably they're probably too short to see.
Well, I'm sure that it's a concern to you, especially when we're trying to protect all these, animals and amphibians that nest and have eggs, because if this population of lizards grows anymore, they're really in trouble. Am I overstating?
No, that's potentially so. Yeah.
So what can we do? Is anything at this point as a citizen of the state?
All right, we have asked that the public keep their eye open for these animals, especially if you live or work in that 2 or 3, 4 county area in southeast Georgia. Basically, we ask that people, if they can, capture or dispatch the animal humanely themselves, do so, as long as it's legal to do so where you're at. And if you see one and can't capture it, then try to get a picture and send us a picture and a report. But basically, we're asking the public to report sightings, and if they can, take animals out of the wild for us and notify us as soon as they do.
And it sounds like they're pretty easy to identify, big black and white lizard.
Right. You would expect so. A lot of people have been confused, I think, by that. They don't realize just how big they are. And so we've had most of the reports that have come in have actually been our native lizards, especially something called the eastern fence lizard, which is dwarfed by a tegu, even when it's an adult. Tegus hatch out of the egg 8 to 10 inches long, which is already larger than almost any of our native lizards that have legs are as an adult. And so essentially, if it's not around a foot long or larger, it's probably not a tegu. But if it is, then it's either a juvenile alligator, which does get mixed up sometimes, or a tegu.
But you don't want to pick either one of those up. Sounds like a tegu is just mean, which makes me wonder why anybody would want it as a pet.
Well, the animals that you see people have oftentimes have grown up in captivity. They are habituated to human contact, and so they tend to be much more docile and better house guests maybe than a wild tegu. But these wild caught animals aren't like that. They will defend themselves if you try and pick them up. They don't want to be petted, and they don't want to be pets.
And you sure don't want to get bitten by one of these or scratched.
No, you can do a Google search for tegu bite, and you can see pictures of it. It can be pretty gruesome.
Whoa, okay, you convinced me. I like to pick up critters, but I don't think I'd be picking that one.
Yeah.
Well, Daniel Sollenberger, thank you so much for joining us today and telling us about the lizard that everybody seems to be talking about these days.
Yeah, no problem. You're welcome.
Good luck eradicating.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks.